the I'm on the advanced math committee, and I think the calculus, financial math, all that is also on view as well. Okay, this is our budget update. Like most months, we had an increase in email and a few donations, but as you can see, our budget is very small and we don't have a lot of expenses. Okay, now on to the main topic of the night, school repurposing. So what we're gonna do, my goal is to, like I normally do at SPC meetings, is walk around and let you speak into the mic. I'm probably not gonna relinquish it tonight, but I'll put it in front of you. You have to talk into the mic because we are live streaming and recording this on YouTube. So if you don't speak into the mic, the recording can't hear you and it's like it never happened. So you need to make sure you speak in the mic. I would like for you to ask one question at a time. So not total for the night, but one at a time, and then we'll rotate around and go from there. If that is not working, we'll pivot, and I'll interrupt the meeting and pivot to a different structure. Maybe we'll stand in line, or I also have a lot of index cards. We could also switch to written questions if needed. Okay, sound okay?
I think it is.
All right. Who has a question?
Hi, I'm Amy Fergus. I have a kid at Redfield and I have two at Redfield, one at Desert Canyon Middle. Last night, Dr. Menzel, you mentioned that there are several options for phase 2 in the north, and roughly quoting you, the most advantageous solutions can be identified with robust community dialogue. How can we as parents be involved in that dialogue?
So I appreciate the question, and there have been lots of conversations about, is it one committee, is it multiple committees? And I don't know the answer to that. And when I think about the number of schools that we're talking about and the number of families that are engaged, it feels to me like it's more than one committee. But I think there'll be multiple opportunities for input. I'll give an example. For Desert Canyon Elementary and Middle School, when we talked about the potential of a potential K-8 merger, we had parents and staff and administrators from both schools. At one point, we brought in individuals from Redfield to participate in the conversation. So I would envision something like that at a larger scale. And then, given the nature of those conversations, having some larger meetings for Q&A, and I would expect maybe some surveying of families as well to identify reactions to any of the proposed changes.
Does everyone know what the proposed changes are for phase 2?
Well, there really aren't proposed changes per se, so I think it's a fair question. So in phase 2, we have a number of schools that are listed, but as outlined on November 18th, we're looking at going from 29 to 25 buildings, reducing our footprint because of our excess capacity. That's a big part of our challenge, is that we have many under-enrolled schools, and it costs a lot of money to keep under-enrolled schools open. And so when you looked at the demographic study, you look at where our enrollment trends are, we have in the Desert Mountain Learning community the need to reduce our footprint by 2 more schools. Which 2 and how that looks, there are many, when I say there are multiple options, not that we've created the options, they're just different configurations that are possible. And that's why we need to spend some time thinking about what's the best alternative to bring forward to the governing board before the 27-28 school year.
I'm going to sit down between these, but if you guys raise your hand. If nobody else has a follow-up, then Amy can go again.
Okay. Sorry. The timeline. So I know you said before 27, 28. What, like putting these committees together and whatever you're doing, is that going to happen starting January?
Yeah. So we start in January. I met with the Cheyenne staff today, and one of the things that we talked about was the timeline for phase 1. We said by December, to allow families and staff time to know what the decision is and make their decisions. I think it needs to be a little bit sooner in phase 2, because what we learned in phase 1 is that when you make the decision after the open enrollment period, that creates some consternation. So that's something that we can do better in the next round. The other is that there's a potential for the board to have on the ballot a bond issue in 26. And I think it's really important for the voters to know what buildings we're asking for the community to invest in, and it shouldn't be in buildings that are going to be repurposed. And so I think we need to be able to be clear about that. So I think somewhere in the October timeframe, maybe September, but I think it needs to move up in order to meet those two objectives.
Thank you. But now I have to think about this. So my follow-up then is you're saying that phase 2 would begin, we would know what phase 2 looks like in September, or October of next year so that we can make informed decisions.
Yes, that would be the goal. So there are so many moving parts and pieces this year, but we'll start in January and figure out what the structure is to engage people in the conversation. But then with the ultimate goal of getting a board decision on whatever that final recommendation is by the October meeting at the latest.
Can you share more about, so being an ECHO family was like, just give me to December 9th. So we're now on the 10th, we're past, we know what's happening. So what is the timeline for the potential repurpose voting and what that looks like? And is this something that the repurpose idea is something for next school year you're thinking for both school year, like for both schools? And so what's the timeline moving forward for
Right,
both?
so when the board voted, it was a two-part motion. One is to close the educational program and to repurpose, but there wasn't a repurpose plan on the agenda. That'll come after the first of the year. So there have been suggestions for both Pima and for ECHO, and today I received an email about another potential. So there's some interest in what the potential repurposing could be. The board has a facility use rubric that was adopted a couple of years ago. So any proposal that comes forward will be put through that rubric. We'll share it with the governing board. My guess is that won't get action until February, just because their regular meeting's January 6th. They have a study session on January 20th, so they wouldn't act then. So probably the February board meeting would be the earliest for potential repurposing. And I think, I don't want to prejudice any potential outcomes. I think thinking about ECHO in particular, the arts magnet conversation, that's not something that would happen in the 26-27 school year. There's a lot of study that needs to be done. There's been a committee that has been formed, and there'll be a subset of that committee that works at arts magnets specifically. And so that will take more time if, in fact, ECHO would be the place for that. There are other things that we could put in ECHO, even if it's just for 1 year, to cover the cost of operating it, maintaining the space. As you know, ECHO has amazing gardens and other things that are worth taking care of. And so we'll have to have those conversations about what that looks like. And what other potential tenants there might be in the short term. We've said all along we'd like to grow preschool because there's a need in the Arcadia learning community for that, and we have space there, so I think that's still a viable option. And the question is then what else besides that potentially?
So you said previously that you would have support for the students at Pima and Echo Canyon. There was no support for them today. There was no emotional support. The only support they had was their normal teachers. What happened, and why do you hate these children so much?
Well, I don't hate any of the children. Actually, we love all the children. We did have a crisis canine that came on the campus today. We have school, yes, at Pima. I have. So the dog may not have been in your child's classroom. We do have people who are mobilized. I know Dr. Bono and Ms. Mitchell have been working with the team there, working with the counselors, social workers. And so we've been having those conversations. They've been in contact with Mr. Hodo to say, okay, what other supports, what kind of things that do children need? So there were conversations. It was part of our discussion this morning. Well, but what I'm saying is that the dog was on campus. There are other people who are there. I'll let Leah and Christine talk about the specifics because we've had our team working to make sure that the supports were there.
We also know that what research and evidence tells us when kids are going through hard times, it's not strangers that always make them feel better, it's people, the trusted adults that they know. In Scottsdale Unified School District, we employ full-time counselors at every school every day. We also employ full-time school psychologists across campuses, as well as social workers. Each one of those staff members that your children are familiar with walked all the classrooms today along with the principal. They are also doing triage. Okay, well, what I'm telling you is those supports exist in our schools and campuses every day. I will make sure tomorrow morning somebody talks to your child.
But maybe not in the microphone unless you want it on YouTube. Yeah.
Get your name so I can have Principal Hodo connect with you first thing in the morning.
And the accusations of hate are really harmful, and I recognize it's really volatile right now. I also just want to say, having been a parent whose child was reboundaried in August of 2020, my child went to a new school and our boundaries were changed. I recognize how difficult it is to look into a sad kid who isn't going to be with their friends, is totally unexpected. Yes, ma'am. All of the children were really impacted. And so what I would ask is for also some thoughtfulness around the staff that are impacted and what people show up to do every single day. And there's not a soul in Scottsdale Unified School District at Pima Elementary or any of our schools that has hate in their heart for the children. Every person that showed up today felt compassion. We feel sadness. We recognize that this is a disruption to each of your lives and to your children's lives. But we also know that partnering together and helping to find a way forward, using counseling services, providing you some on-site supports and some tips to how to talk to kids is a way forward. There is not a single person who wants harm for your child. We want success for you and their child. Okay.
Any other questions?
Some of the other districts are taking other measures to not close their schools. Why aren't we taking those same measures?
So can you be more specific about what measures you're referring to? I've talked with a lot of my colleagues, but I'm curious what you're talking about in terms of measures to not close schools.
You used the word repurpose. What do you mean by that?
So from a repurpose perspective, you can think about a school closure as saying we're going to close down a building. That means no longer use, potentially dispose of the asset. So when we're talking repurposing, there's a potential use for the school buildings, but the program itself, the K-5 at Pima, the K-8 at Echo Canyon, those programs will be closed. We are going to repurpose the buildings for other uses. And so we proposed to the governing board 2 viable options for how to do that next year with the 2 schools that were on the list. So for Pima, we talked about Level D special education programming. For Echo Canyon, we talked about moving community education into that space along with expanding preschool. Community education is self-funded. It doesn't come out of the maintenance and operating budget. So that means you can cover the cost of taking care of the asset without putting a burden on the maintenance and operating budget. So that's the benefit at Echo. The Level D programming, we spend $2.7 million in private placement dollars. And if we can bring those programs back and spend that money to offer those services at Pima, and then we move the nutrition services program from Oak, because community ed would move from Oak, and we move that to Pima as well. It's an excellent location for community pickup and drop off. It has been used for that food distribution in the past, and so you can put multiple things in Pima that benefit the community, allow us to be able to keep it in good form while we're saving the dollars from not operating the K-5 and K-8 programs that are costing the district money. And then when you close Oak, you save $125,000 a year. So those are the moves that we're making in order to get the savings in the M&O budget.
And the committees that you're forming that was asked earlier, how do you get on those committees and when will they be forming?
So they'll be formed after the first of the year. Typically what we've done is we've posted on our website through a committee hub to indicate that there's an opportunity for people to participate. In the case of Desert Canyon Elementary and Desert Canyon Middle School, and when we set it up this fall, we moved more quickly and we just asked the principals to identify parents. So because it's a dual language immersion program and Desert Canyon Middle School is a CGP program, we said we want to make sure we have representative parents from each of these groups. We want to make sure we have teachers from the different grade levels. So we said this is the kind of representation we need. Going into phase 2, I think we cast a wider net to find who's interested and invite them to the table and make sure that we've kind of structured the committee focus so that it's relevant. My fear is that because we've seen this in many of the emails that come in, well, do this to somebody else's school so that you don't do something to my school. And what we really want is to have an open-minded conversation about what's the best structure to leverage the resources we have in terms of our schools, and how do we ensure they're full and thriving, and what are the next steps necessary. And so when it becomes that we're just going to protect what I have, and then somebody else can, be the one who has to make the, adjust to the reality, like Pima and Echo Canyon, that's harder. So we want to make sure that we have people who are coming with an open mind to say, we're trying to solve a fundamental problem of having more square footage than we have students, and this has been an ongoing problem. The truth of the matter is, this should have started a long time ago. And while people have had conversations about it, it's so hard that people don't do it. The truth is that if I wanted to take the easy way out, I could have easily walked away and retired and let somebody else do this. But the problem doesn't go away because of who's in my chair or who's in the board chairs. The underlying reality is that the state underfunds public education. The state has created incentives for more and more families to make different choices. They've given away $1 billion in unaccountable, non-transparent ESAs with no evidence that it's producing any kind of academic outcome. And local community schools are the ones who are most impacted by those policy decisions. I didn't make them. We have to adjust to them. If we want those to be different, then we need to lean on our elected officials to make different laws, to fund public education properly. That's the challenge in front of us. The other one that I also can't change is the demographics. We have a declining birth rate in the state of Arizona. We are down, even if we had maintained a 71% capture rate in Scottsdale like we had in 2010, we'd still be down more than 3,000 students. So we're down 6,000 in the current environment. But even if we stayed at 71%, we'd be down 3,000 kids, the equivalent of 600 elementary school students. So that's the challenge demographically that we can't control. Financially, there was a way for the state to invest more heavily in public education. They chose to go in a very different direction.
So the demographic study, if you guys haven't watched it or read the report, I highly suggest you do it. I did a deep dive on my kid's school because my principal was really excited. Arcadia had the highest capture of in-district capture of any school in the district at 89%. And when I looked into those numbers, there's only 800 kids in the Arcadia area that go to Arcadia, or that could go to Arcadia. They capture 89% of 800 kids. That's a tiny, if Arcadia only had those students, it wouldn't work.
Yeah, and Arcadia is over 1,600. In fact, it's close to being the second largest high school in Scottsdale Unified. So when you think about the number of high school age kids that live in the Arcadia boundary versus what we have in the high school, you have a full, vibrant, and thriving high school at Arcadia because we're able to attract from other neighboring communities, and 25% of our overall enrollment is from other neighboring communities. So that's part of the competition that we have in a choice and charter environment, and we do attract 25% of our enrollment. 4,600 students every year choose SUSD from outside of our boundaries. So we understand what some of the challenges are, but demographically, we have more school buildings than students, and that's not going to change in the next 10 years for sure, according to the demographic study, and it's been the pattern for the last 15.
I know you have more questions. Andrew.
Hi, thanks for coming tonight. I had a question about the communication that came out today, and it was specifically talking about Phase 2 and how that would impact potentially the Desert Mountain community. And I was looking at the list of schools that could potentially be impacted, and I was wondering, I know nothing is set in stone and that we're going to have the committees and there's going to be a process, but the schools that were listed, can you give us just a little bit of an overview about the schools that could potentially be affected and why and how?
So the schools, and we talked specifically on this one about, and I have to go back because I don't have the letter in front of me. I don't remember if it included the two from the Coronado Learning Community, which had been in prior communication. So I want to talk specifically about that as well. But in the communication today, then it was really Desert Mountain Learning Community, Anasazi, Redfield, Laguna, Desert Canyon Elementary, Desert Canyon Middle School, and Cheyenne. And so Cheyenne is included because of the potential that there could be some shifting in terms of where Cheyenne is located. Again, not a recommendation, not a decision, just an observation based on Cheyenne's current enrollment and the wait list that they've had over the last couple of years, and the underutilization of Copper Ridge. So that's on the table for that reason. But you have Copper Ridge, which is boundaried to the Chaparral learning community, but it's really in geographic proximity with all the rest of the Desert Mountain learning community. So that's why they're all in that same conversation together. When any news report says we're talking about 6 schools next year, we're talking about having the conversation with those schools. We're not talking about closing 6 schools. So the November 18th presentation, I outlined going from 29 to 25 by the end of 27-28, or the beginning of 27-28. That's still the goal. So it's really a reduction of 4 school buildings over a 2-year period of time to kind of recalibrate our footprint. Difficult decisions, but that's the goal. So you would be looking at 2 more schools in the next school year.
So would that include potentially consolidation, and what would happen? Would that include consolidation potentially, and what would, if you were to make a move to Copper Ridge, what would happen to the Cheyenne campus? And again, nothing's in stone, it's all up for discussion, but I know there have been discussions, there's rumors, of course, so if you could kind of give us an idea.
That's why it's so hard, and I can talk about theoreticals, right? So the one that I put out on November 18th was if Cheyenne moves to Copper Ridge, then you could merge Laguna and Redfield into that Cheyenne campus because it's got capacity to house both. Right now, with the pre-K through 5 enrollment at Laguna and Redfield, neither campus could house the other. But the Cheyenne campus could house those 2 together. And so then you have a question about what do you do with Copper Ridge? Is it just get absorbed? They absorbed by Cheyenne? Do they get reboundaried into Desert Canyon Elementary and Middle School? Do they become part of the new Redfield, Laguna, Copper Ridge merger? I mean, there's a lot of different things you could consider there. You could, if Cheyenne doesn't move, you could consider that Redfield might connect with Desert Canyon Elementary School and Laguna connect with Anasazi. That's a potential that could be explored. There are pros and cons to any of the potential scenarios, but until we have the conversation, we don't know what makes the most sense. We don't know what matters most to parents. If Cheyenne were to move to Copper Ridge, how many of their families would choose not to drive that extra distance, right? There's a question that we need to know with respect to the unintended consequences of some of those things. So I think that's part of what we would explore, some of the surveying we would need to do. But I think those are the buildings, and the reason why is you look at enrollment, K5, Laguna's at 303, Redfield 376, Anasazi just over 400, and Copper Ridge was 441 this year, K8, and so well below that in terms of their K5 population. And so that's why those schools were specifically listed for phase 2.
Okay, so phase 2, you said the conversations will start in January?
Yes, that's the intent.
Okay.
So we have to identify what the committee structure looks like so that we can begin to recruit people to participate and then figure out a cadence of meetings, but we plan to kick that off early in January.
Okay, so Pima and Echo Canyon are scheduled to end their schooling
at the end of this school year.
the end of this school year in 2026. So do you estimate the next 2 more schools to close in 2027?
Yes.
Okay, and you brought up the Desert Canyon community. You also said and a couple other schools in, is it Coronado?
Oh yeah, Yavapai and Tonalea.
Okay, so are those 2 schools kind of connected with this Desert Canyon community conversation, or that's something separate?
Separate.
That will be maybe a year later?
Yeah, I would anticipate, so post the decision in phase 1, providing the opportunity for students to land at other schools, we are expecting that we'll see a growth trajectory for Yavapai in particular, which will help feed into Tonalea Middle School. The goal always was, when the decision was made to go from Tonalea K8 to Tonalea Middle School, was to have a more robust feeder pattern into Coronado High School. When it was a K8, the school was full, there was no more room for middle school kids, and so that meant that you had a pinch point that made it so that Coronado was going to always struggle with enrollment. That's why the decision was made to reopen Yavapai. So in this environment, we need to make sure that Yavapai and Hohokam are filling Tonalea with enough kids to feed into Coronado. That's the goal. If that didn't happen for some reason, demographically, we didn't have enough students, then we might need a phase 3 conversation. We're hoping that that's not the case, but if we did, it would be 2 years down the road.
So, sorry, to go back to Copper Ridge, and I know you discussed the discussion about not repurposing, I'm sorry, the boundaries, because Copper Ridge really does fit into Desert Mountain Community Learning Center, or Learning Community better. Is that on the table to then change the boundary so that Copper Ridge, if it becomes Cheyenne, would then feed into DM?
So Cheyenne already as a non-boundary school feeds into DM. And so then I think there is a logical question that the board would have to wrestle with, and we'd have to redraw the boundaries to determine if you make that formal feeder into, is that the boundary for them? Because you're gonna have to figure out what the boundaried school is for what is now Copper Ridge if Cheyenne occupies that space. So like in January, we're gonna have a boundary conversation related to Pima. We'd have to have another boundary conversation there. And I mean, I suspect there was a really good reason for why Copper Ridge was boundary to Chaparral back in the day. I just don't understand what that is. I don't know if anyone here does. Maybe you do, Dr. Bono? You have to come to the mic because it's being recorded.
At the time, not to go too far back, but there was property there to build another high school. So in the interim, while that high school was being built, and it never was, as you know, the DM complex was hitting capacity much closer than SHAP. So the decision was made to bus the kids, and I can't believe I called it SHAP. I went there and we never called it SHAP, Chaparral, to bus the kids from Copper Ridge up to Chaparral.
Yeah, thank you, that's helpful.
Hi, you talked about closing some of we have 3 district offices, correct, right now? Oak.
Oh, yes, okay, yeah, so there's Oak, Main Street, and Mojave District
Yes.
Annex, yes.
Okay, and so you're talking about moving Oak to save $125,000?
Uh-huh.
And then how about the other 2? Should that be part of the phase 2 discussion?
It's actually part of the conversation now.
Okay.
So we're looking at the potential of selling Main Street.
Okay.
If we're able to sell Main Street, then we would move the HR and Finance Department over to Mojave District Annex. We'd move some of the people here, special ed in particular, not all of them, but some, over to Pima as we're supporting the Level D programming, so that we'd be able to reduce that footprint by 2 buildings, not 1.
Yeah, okay. And is it more lucrative to sell or to rent out? Because you've talked about with other schools holding onto the building and, being a landlord.
So this is my perspective.
Okay.
The Main Street, I think it makes sense to sell because there's never going to be a school built on that property. Where
Sure.
it's located and what the footprint is, that will never be competition for us. If you sell an actual school building, you can't discriminate against who gets the high bid. So if a charter school comes in and buys it, then you have competition that can take more of your kids. That exacerbates our problem. So leasing in that case is more advantageous, and it allows you to hold on to an asset so that if demographically something changed, you have the property and the ability to get it going again, whereas if you sell it, you're stuck.
Yep, I remember that conversation with the Madison, and I agree with that. I'm just asking if being a landlord to somewhere in Old Town, not a school because it's not set up to be a school, but an office or anything, would that be more lucrative in the long run than selling the property?
So we've had conversations with Mr. Rayler, not only on that, but on some of our other properties. So Apache, where we have a bus garage and a former elementary school closed maybe in the 80s, there have been some discussions about could you convert part of that to workforce housing, and there have been developers interested in partnering with us, and then they move away because under state law, if you're going to have a lease that's over 20 years or if you're going to sell, it has to get approved by the voters. And so there are conversations about could we do some things that make sense as someone that was leasing to someone else. The issue is how much time and energy does it take away from the core work of our building services team that are working to make sure our schools are functioning at a high level for our staff. If you could generate enough money to support a team to take care of the operational details for a lease, it could work. I just don't know that we have enough interest yet at that point, but it's a fair question.
Yeah, and if it would generate money, that goes to feed
Yeah.
the students and support.
Yeah, no, any of that rental income is beneficial for us, for sure.
And potentially, could all of the district offices be absorbed into school campuses?
So,
to utilize?
when I'll answer the theoretical, they could potentially. I don't recommend it. So first, the school campuses were designed to educate kids, and so if you move administrative offices into a school building, that becomes something that people might get frustrated with. There's just a lot of focus on what happens in terms of administration. And I heard today that someone said, well, the reason you closed Echo is because the superintendent wants to have a better view of Camelback, so he's moving. Well, we're not. We're going to stay here at Mojave District Annex, but there are lots of things that people make up. I also didn't entertain the idea of moving all of our offices to Pima. Beautiful campus, but it needs to be serving kids. And that's what the intention was when it was rebuilt, not for administrative offices. So that's the reason why we typically don't look at admin that way, because unless the voters specifically authorize a building for admin, it's hard to do. When you repurpose a part of this, or you have we got Main Street in a land swap with the city. So it was just one of those things where it was easy to use then because you were able to acquire it without any exchange of cash.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am a parent and I also am a staff member at Kiva Elementary. We have seen influx of Pima students already. So I guess my question is, for other schools in addition to Kiva who will start absorbing those students, how are we going to support teachers more, having more students in their classrooms with possible additional aides to support an overflow of students that some of these schools already are at capacity. So, and also, are we going to add maybe additional social worker or psychologist hours to support these children who are moving from school to school within a school year, as well as next year when they are moved from one to the other?
And the answer is yes. I don't know who wants to take that. Christine?
Great question. So first off, we have no intention, it has not been brought to the board to increase our current ratio. So people might think, oh, our class sizes are going to balloon. We have no intention at this point to ask the ratio to change. Our teachers who are currently at Echo and Pima, HR has already started working with them today, because as our kids move to other schools, we're going to need those teachers who know and love our kids to go with them, right? So that's the hope. And then also regarding capacity, we just finished our capacity study, which I think someone alluded to earlier. And there's only a couple schools that are at capacity, meaning they could not really take many more kids. The majority of our schools can take many, many more kids. And with the current classrooms they have at the current ratio. So we have a couple schools who could take a whole nother class per grade level at the current ratio and still have some breathing rooms for their specialized programs, their special ed classes, their specials, their gifted pullout, their PE, art, music, what have you. Does that help answer?
Totally understand that a lot of the schools are not at capacity. I think the number is 36 students to a classroom, is that correct? Depends on the grade. Okay, so just from my perspective, in a classroom of 25 students to one teacher, it's a lot. And that's not capacity, and that's where a lot of our classrooms are now. And a lot of the schools, Kiva is very fortunate. We have a lot of aides that help teachers in different grade levels, but a lot of other schools don't. So I guess that's my question, because these students are coming into not only Kiva, but other schools in the area that are not as fortunate as Kiva, which we have a ton of PTO funding to get aides in our classrooms. A lot of other schools don't. So I know with budget cuts from state and federal levels, how are we going to support our teachers and the students who are coming in droves, you know what I mean? And also, to honor the teachers who are being displaced as well, how are we going to support them?
So part of the plan for next year is that when we move teachers to the receiving schools, and we'll identify where the majority of the students go from ECHO and PIMA, that will have the net impact of reducing class sizes for all of the teachers in those buildings for that year of transition. That helps with the familiarity. The kids know the teachers. You can, even if you're not in a teacher's class that you recognize, you might see them in the hallway, and just that level of familiarity helps. And so I think that the benefit next year, so not for this year with families who move mid-year, but for next year, that's 26, 27. There's a plan for how we do that for teachers from ECHO and PIMA so that they land in the majority of the receiving schools. So we've used as a hypothetical, if 75% of PIMA kids end up in Navajo, then you'd have a comparable number of teachers who might make that move. We want to make sure that we balance that properly, but for 1 year, we can have lower class sizes than is the ratio that the board approved in order to support the transition. So that, I think that benefits the receiving school, it benefits the schools that were impacted by the closure, and most importantly, benefits the kids in terms of the support they get in the transition.
Do you anticipate a priority transfer window for staff for ECHO and PIMA?
So yes, we've talked about how we prioritize that. I believe that letters were sent to staff at both schools today from HR, talking about next steps in the process and the meetings that they're going to schedule to have that conversation, not only with teachers, but with the classified staff as well, so that we can begin the planning process. And we've said that, again, and so what we don't have is bumping. So you don't get to say, well, I'd like to go to this other school and I can bump someone because I have more seniority. But from looking at, what is it that your needs are, where would you like to be, and what are our needs as a district, having that conversation and putting the PIMA and ECHO staff at the top of the list, I believe that's part of the conversation.
I can speak to that a little bit as well. I get the opportunity to work closely with the Scottsdale Education Association, and in our conversations, even as early as this week, a prioritization and a preference, either a priority window or some level of preference for surplusing, should that be the case, is on their mind specifically for ECHO and PIMA. And so what the specific logistics of that look like, we're still mapping out through interest-based negotiations, but in all conversations, all sides have come with the thought, we have to prioritize the children, we have to prioritize the staff, and how that preference plays out for staff is being worked out right now.
I wanted to follow up about the board-approved ratios. Where is that information?
I can tell you what it was. I was just looking it up because I knew. Oh, I believe it's on the website, but I'm going to find out. But I'm happy to tell you also what it is, and then I'll verify. So, for some reason, I always get the numbers wrong, but I got it right this time. Kinder is 24, first grade is 26, second grade is 28, third through fifth is 29, middle and high.
In middle and high, it's different for lab sciences. The place where it is specifically laid out is on the governing board webpage. There's a board policies tab. In that tab, you'll find section J. All the J policies are really around student assignment, student placement, and you'll find that it's not a policy, it's a regulation. So I'll double check before we leave so that you have it. I think it's JCR, but that could likely be incorrect. So I'll make sure I correct the record. But in the policy manual, it is section J that talks about student assignment, student placement, and ratios, both for regular education classes, also for special education.
What's the difference between a policy and a regulation?
So the governing board approves policy. That sets the parameters for our operation. The regulation kind of puts meat on the bones. So if you think of the policy as the framing of the house, the regulation gives more guidance to staff in terms of how we're supposed to implement that policy. The staff creates the regulation. The board doesn't approve those. They see them. They have an opportunity for input into the regulations, but they set the policy. That guides the regulation that we develop. The regulations can be changed if we find that something didn't work, but it's really the meat on the bones for how we implement the policy.
One more follow-up, thank you. So if we merge all these schools in Desert Mountain, these numbers are our class sizes will basically stay the same as what they.
That
what they are
is the
now.
plan, yes.
Okay.
Unless the board changed the ratios, and you might have heard one of the board members say last night, that's certainly not something he would be interested in considering. You got to get 3 votes for anything to be done, but while that has been discussed as one option, I think that we'll see what happens, but they won't be far off, right? I haven't heard any proposals to say, hey, let's increase it by 5 or something ridiculous, yeah.
I really just had a comment. I've been a parent for 15 years here, and I'm an alumni as well as the district, and so I've always, throughout that time, followed very closely. I watch all the board meetings. I've been very involved in Scottsdale Parent Council, and I just want to thank all of you for taking this on, because past boards really have not done what they should have done. The can's been kicked down the road, and now we've gotten to this point where we really have no choice. Over the last 5 years, I've seen all the little changes that have been made to try to eke out a little bit more before some dramatic change has to be made. And it sucks that dramatic changes are being made, and it feels to some people that this is all sudden, but this is not sudden. This has been talked about. It's just been brushed aside and kind of ignored. So I just really appreciate the hard work that you all are doing, and please pass that along to all of your staff as well.
Will do. Thank you.
Mine isn't a question, it's more if you could clarify. I feel like I understand, but I've heard parents make comments about, oh, all this money spent for the sports complex on 68th and Oak. And I feel like I have an understanding how there's different funds and how you can spend it, but I do think that you speaking to that might be good for anyone listening or may need to know.
I think that's an important point. So the work on 68th and Oak, that's the site of the former Tonalea Elementary School. And it had been sitting there and was an eyesore for the community. Lots of questions about how we use it. At one point, you might remember there was a conversation about leasing to Phoenix Rising, and they were going to build a major sports complex there. That kind of fell apart. And what Mr. Rayler did is he took a look at what could we do as a district in renovating the space to make it usable for the community, not an eyesore. Not selling it so that you have a bunch of multi-family housing units or something else that would be undesirable to the neighbors. And the funds that we use for that are plant funds. So plant funds come from the proceeds of a sale of a district asset. Some time ago we sold, a very long time ago, Scottsdale High was sold. The district had plant funds. You have some other things that feed into plant funds, but they're restricted in terms of how you can use them. You can still only use them for capital. So we had about 7 million, maybe a little bit more than 7 million, and we took about $1 million of that to help do the work on the property at 68th and Oak. So it doesn't come out of maintenance and operating expenses. It's not money that can be used to pay for staff. It is money that's available to do the kinds of things we did at 68th and Oak so that we can have an asset in that part of Scottsdale where kids can play on the fields. We have sand volleyball courts, so some of our schools compete there. Ultimately, the next phase is to renovate that last remaining building so that it can be used as a community center in that area. And we want to retain the property because if, again, there was some kind of demographic shift, the district has the ability to do something with that versus if you sold it, you'd never reacquire it at the price that you got it for initially. And so we want to take good care of it, make sure that it's a benefit to the community, and we use plant funds to be able to put those improvements there.
I would like to know how the community center at Oak would work when there's the El Dorado Community Center right across the street.
So the community education has, what are you talking about? You mean the?
El Dorado Pool by Coronado?
Yeah, so our community education office, it's not a community center, our community education office is at Oak. Yeah, so the department responsible for early learning and all of our community education and then summer school, their staff are housed at Oak, as are nutrition services. And so if you move those out, you can really close down that building because it's not really serving students specifically. So then you save $125,000 in the operating costs from that building. The long term, and I don't know whether or not it's possible, but we've had conversations with Dr. Wilson at EVIT about how you can expand career and technical education opportunities. I'd love it if EVIT would rent that Oak campus and bring more CTE programs across the street from Coronado High School so that our kids don't have to travel so far to participate. So it could be a win-win potentially with EVIT. So that's a longer-term potential. We have to broach that with EVIT, but I think there are ways to think about using that space to benefit the community. And that's why we're, some of these decisions feel fast. I will acknowledge that it feels fast, particularly for Pima and Echo, and that's hard. Some of it, to Emmy's point, people have talked about a long time, just never did anything. We're trying to be very thoughtful in phasing these things in because it's really hard, but we also want to make sure that 10 years from now when we look back, we can say those were thoughtful decisions designed to ensure that we're able to be a thriving and viable school district into the future. And I said last night at the board meeting, when Scottsdale High was closed, that created a lot of outrage. Part of the reason it created outrage is because the school that was supposed to be closed in that conversation was initially Arcadia. And that was the one that was on the chopping block. And at the very end, they made the decision not to close Arcadia and to close Scottsdale High. If you look at demographically where we are now, from 82 to now 2020, almost 26, you would not have been able to sustain Scottsdale High and Coronado High School in that same proximity because the face of the community changed significantly, but you would have lost those Arcadia kids. And so there was a difficult decision made, and over time, I think hindsight's 20/20, you can see the benefit of it. So I just think that's hard in the moment, but we also need to be forecasting into the future.
I'm going to request that you please don't talk about Scottsdale High. You weren't here. You weren't involved in that. And you've gotten several things wrong with talking about it. So please refrain. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question? Yeah.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you. I was at the board meeting last night and observed very emotional testimony. I understand why it's emotional. And in the face of, in my opinion, often disrespectful comments aimed in your direction, you remained calm and professional. And I just want you to know that there are people who notice that and really appreciate your approach. Thank you for being forthcoming, for being honest, and for admitting things that could have gone differently or better, and lessons that we've all learned from this process. I just want you to know we really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I had a question about if an entire campus was moved. So are all the teacher and staff jobs secured just from one location to the next? I know there's always going to be movement and some people won't want to go to the next location, but in theory, are all of their jobs secured moving to the new location?
There would be no plan to disrupt the staffing model in that particular scenario at all. Yes.
Anyone else?
I had a thought just when you're bringing up the ratios. Could that also be something used? Could we lower the ratios and use that to attract more people from charter schools in a way and back? Has that been discussed?
That has been brought up before. And so just like there's a projected 1.5 million savings if you increase the ratios, there's a $1.5 million cost if you decrease the ratios. So from a research, why?
No, to what? What is the 1.5, decreasing them to what number?
So by one. So it's a one student change. That increment is about a $1.5 million hit to the budget or savings to the budget. And so the research doesn't really show that class size makes the difference in terms of achievement. There are other things that make a much bigger difference. So there are some perception issues, but from a research perspective, that's not the case. And so when you think about optimizing resources, if you're really going to take the class size ratio into consideration, it was really K3 that the initial research, and that's what the STAR is, that's 20, 25, 30 years old. I'm old now, long time ago. And so while I understand that from a marketing perspective it might be appealing, I don't know that you could reduce them enough to say that's going to make the difference, because if you go from 29 to 28, it doesn't feel like it goes to 25. So you'd have to reduce them pretty significantly to get somebody's attention, and that has a pretty big price tag. And I will say this, I think that people should put all the ideas on the table. When I give a response like that, it's not saying that you should dismiss it. I'm just saying, here's the analysis that we've done, And then there's decisions that have to be made about what risk you're willing to take, how long you're willing to take to see if those risks pan out. It's like with any new specialty program. I love the idea of an arts magnet. I want to know, is there enough demand from non-enrolled students currently to be able to fill it? What's the right location? What's the right grade configuration? You know, there's a lot of things that we need to know. So if we do our due diligence and we find that there's something there that warrants a pilot project, then how long are you going to give it? 3 years, 5 years? And if it doesn't work, do you have the courage to be able to say, no, we're going to pull the plug on it? And as we know, closing something is a lot harder than it is to open it.
On that, so what is the due diligence? Will there be polling of community, parents, people outside of what is attracting them or making them leave? You know?
We've done some of that, and Leah might have top of mind the answers that parents gave in our climate culture survey, but we're going to do more polling and surveying as well, particularly when it comes to any specialty program that's been proposed, because we really need to have a good sense of, does that resonate or not? 3 years ago up at Copper Ridge, the principal sent out a survey just to the families in the community about the potential of an arts magnet, and it kind of got a tepid response, a meh. So it wasn't something where they said, yeah, that's going to make all the difference for us, so it never got out of an exploration phase. But if the data showed something different, that probably would have moved more quickly.
Thanks so much for the question. Also, annually, we send a climate and culture survey to staff, families, and to our secondary students. This year, we also layered in a question asking our students and our families, what type of academic programs would you like to see more of on your child's campus? From there, we were able to trend that data, and what we found, athletics, arts, advanced academics, dual language immersion. What we found, we asked about small schools. You'll hear that come up pretty regularly. What about small schools? What about small schools? Very, very few of our children want to exist in small schools, and a small percentage of our families, I think in the 20%, wanted small schools. Our next step is to further identify that data, and then we are launching we have a team that will look first at our specialized or signature programs to make sure the return on investment, are we maximizing all of those current programs? And then subsets of that team will also then do more feasibility around arts magnet, gifted and advanced academics, and a concept of early college. That team will also decide if they want to further investigate small schools. And I will put out there, just because I know there are people listening and we've talked about small schools a number of times. Really what the research will tell you around small schools is that number's between 300 and 500. To get to what is considered a small school model to be fiscally responsible, you're hearing that a lot. What that usually means is a significant amount of shared services. So for example, we have a number of our elementary schools that are considered in literature small. They have about 400 kids. In a small school model, those types of schools would not be fully staffed with assistant principals. They would not be fully staffed with electives. They would not be fully staffed with counselors, social workers. In a small school climate or a small school model, the amount of shared resources is what allows it to be fiscally manageable. And so we are hearing, because some of our neighbors are retrofitting some of their schools and calling them small schools and reconfiguring, but we aren't hearing from our students or really from our families a strong desire to have this really small school model. We also, in our last fiscal cycle, our governing board doesn't want, and they indicated to us they don't want single administrators at our small school campuses. And so there are some of those hallmarks of Scottsdale Unified School District that we have great value around, nurses, some of those types of things that really prevent some implementation of small school. And there wasn't a large appetite, but it's from that most recent data that will come to a larger team. That team will then study the feasibility of different specialized and specialty programs. And currently we are inviting families from those specialized schools. They have, I think, until Friday to finish their applications, and then it will go out to a larger realm, because having voices is it's important, it's essential. These are your children. It's my community too. I live here. I get the opportunity to live in South Scottsdale. My kid graduated last year, but this is our community, and so we do want everybody connected, invested in thinking through and problem solving, but it is difficult times.
You guys bring up the surveys. As a parent, we receive a lot of emails, a lot of text messages, a lot of digital correspondence. I am curious what your collection data shows as a percentage of how much you get that back, because sometimes it comes and goes, and then you forget what the deadline is, and you don't have a voice all of a sudden. So in lieu of just sending out surveys and obviously having, these meetings and whatnot, I know some people think this information is just coming out when it's not, but is there anything that us as a community can do to help get this information out quicker? Are there PTO meetings that you guys can attend to get the information out to parents, and then by word of mouth have it kind of go down the ladder and chain of command? Because I think in our digital age, it feels very disconnected to just give you guys a voice by a survey. I think some people do want to be heard, and it feels better to have a connection like that. I don't know.
So we've done that before. We've been to PTO meetings. We've held town halls in each of the learning communities. Attendance is variable, right? So some PTOs are well attended, and others you get 4 or 5 people. Our town halls, we've had 25, 30 people, and sometimes you've had 5. So we think it's still worth the effort to kind of create the space and opportunity. The other thing that we know, and as a teacher and another teacher here, when you send home the survey in Parent Square, parents fill it out. When the district sends it, not so much. So our response rate is directly impacted by who is the sending messenger, and those closest to our kids are the ones who get the best response rate.
Can you get that information to teachers in advance, I guess?
Yeah, so definitely that's great feedback. Typically what we'll do is give school leaders, please copy and paste this in your parent newsletter, please give this to your teachers, but also giving it direct to teachers I think is a great level up of empowerment. I was also gonna say the concept of focus groups that Dr. Menzel brought up is also something that we hear pretty often. What I also know is as families, you are all connected to different social networks too, and so if there are ideas or places that you convene that you think having just a coffee talk or come and meet at Lucy's one morning and let's just chat, please just know that those are ideas that Scottsdale Parent Council can share, that we are open. I think sometimes it's easy. I came from a really large system. We had about 80,000 kids in 100 schools. It's easy to start feeling further and further away. The way that we do that is by leaning into each other and finding the avenues and entry points, and then having those of us that know the information and work in service to you be willing to come at night and come on the weekends, but that is our job. We are committed to this work. I personally, I don't work alongside anybody who's like popping in their car at 4:30, let's run out and we're making millions of dollars every day in our roles. We're committed to public service. We're committed to your children, and so if you have those ideas, if you know of those social networks or those entry points, we'll go. Because it is important for you guys to hear, not only in a formal meeting way, but also in a casual, we're chatting as community members, sharing values, helping each other with growing our children, and hopefully having them all contribute and take great care of us, right? That's the ultimate goal.
Sorry, just back to I think it's amazing to survey, and respond to the responses that we give and the feedback. But what I'm also hearing is with the declining birth rate, it's going to be essential to capture more students outside the boundaries. So I think it's essential that we market and survey parents outside. How we reach them, I don't know, but that's just the consensus,
So the nice thing is that we work with Davidson Beluso a bit and Cox Communications, so we can do geofencing. So we can go all the way over to the 51, north into the Cave Creek area, over to Fountain Hills and south, so that we actually can cast a wider net to target school-age families in some of that marketing. And we've had some benefit from that. Our click rates are really good. They exceed the industry standards, but click rates aren't closing the deal. So at the end of the day, it's about kids that enroll. And so what we find is that when parents tour and they have that connection with the teachers and the administrators on campus and they get a feel for the vibe, that's when we have our best chance of closing the deal. So it's really, the front end marketing is to pique their interest. The seal the deal bit is when they come on our campus and can feel the difference.
I heard you talk about plans for PIMA, like it's a EDP program for special education. Is that finalized, or is there still talks on the table for what that can look like?
So that's going to be our recommendation, and I'll let Leah talk a little bit more about the work that we've done. We also have an outside charter entity that provides some services that has expressed an interest in renting space. I believe it's important to bring options to the board for consideration. They'll all be put through that facility use rubric, so that the board has a way to gauge based on the tool that they adopted. It was a prior board, but it's been adopted for the board, so that it's a thoughtful process to say, okay, what's the best, highest use for the facility?
And along with that, the term EDP, there's a couple of different terms for specialized programs for students with disabilities in terms of their own standalone school. So an EDP program is a school for students that are identified with emotional disabilities, and in our state, it comes with the highest level of regulation where you aren't able to co-locate hardly anything with an EDP. You can open what's called a level D programming, which allows you to serve students from cross categories of disabilities. Often these are children with significant and profound disabilities where we have already identified that their least restrictive environment to access education is a much more privatized setting. And so the thought around PIMA is to have additional conversations. We have lots of families that are out in a wide variety of private placements. We do believe we have incredible teachers here in Scottsdale Unified. We do believe that there are services we could be providing to our children that are currently in private day in a superior way if we had a campus to be able to support them. When I talk about children of that nature, we probably all went to school and we had a teacher, a class full of kids. We moved around from class to class. This is a very different specialized setting where a single classroom for even a small group of kids isn't quite enough. We want to make sure that we have rooms for sensory seeking behaviors, rooms to support emotional and behavioral regulation. And so there's a wide variety of additional resources on the type of campus that would serve that. Our initial thought, though, would not be an EDP because we serve, in our private school setting right now, students from a wide variety of disability categories, and our hope would be to be able to serve as many of them back here in their home district with their teachers if we can.
I was just going to piggyback off what she was saying about the climate surveys and all the emails that we get, and I know that is the district's, trying to get the information to us, so I appreciate that. But I really think you have to meet parents where they are, and I mean that literally, like come to them. And I know that you do the town halls and the learning complexes, but then you're still asking them to come to you, and if there's a way, and I know you only have so many staff members, you only have so many hours in a day, but if there's a way that you could get staff members, especially when it's something like this, at the campuses, talking to the parents there and making it convenient for them. And that's when you're really going to find out how they feel. And so I appreciate all the communications, but I think it really is going to be, you got to get in front of them. And again, you create opportunities for them to come to you, but maybe you could make more efforts to come to them. Like, I think right now, Dennis is going around, he's talking to people about the bond. That's great. He's going to the communities. He's standing there at the schools where the parents are anyway, and he's having those conversations. And so more of that, if possible.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. The challenge, of course, is just like with the other ones, in some of those, he's had 2 or 3 parents, and some he's had 20, 25 parents. And so it is always, it's a game of hit or miss. And when you think about the 20,000 kids that we serve, that's still a small subset of the group. So I think we have to do all of them. It's not an either or, it's a and, right? Yeah.
I also meant to mention, and specifically if you can get in front of the PTOs. The PTOs are the ones with their pulses on the communities.
Right.
So if you can get in front of them and even come to their meetings, then you can get the PTOs engaged, and then they'll get the information out for you. They'll talk about it, they'll put it in their newsletters, they'll get it out for you.
And we come when invited, so That's the
Oh,
ask back
okay.
of the PTOs. We just need to be invited.
Oh, well, but you could also reach out, right, and say, hey, we have this initiative that we're considering, and can we come to your meeting and talk to the parents and talk to you? If there's something coming down the pipe that you're aware of, because we
Right.
aren't always aware of what's
Right.
coming.
So I'm going to just recognize how hard this is. Like, I send emails to PTOs every month. Some of them will not put information in their newsletters, and we've even invited ourselves to come to their meeting, and they don't. We've had no replies. So maybe for something like this, you would get a bigger hit rate from PTOs, but this is a hard problem to reach people where they're at. So yeah, keep the ideas coming, because I want to hear them too. I never know how many people are going to show up to meetings. Okay, do we have any more questions? Okay, yeah. No, you're good.
So this is a question I feel like is very far removed from maybe you, but it's still, so my daughter's going to be going to Tavon next year, from ECHO, and I'm fine with that. We're good. She's been preparing herself for a while, and I taught there, so I feel good about it. But the one thing that's stressing me out the most, honestly, is just a different start time. So we've been a 7:45 start time since preschool, and I work at a school that's 7:45 start time, so it's worked. We drop her off at 7, and everything's good. So I know that Tavon has the before care, and it has the aftercare, thankfully, so we'll take, advantage of that. But I know that Tavon is City of Phoenix, ECHO is City of Scottsdale, and the aftercare program has always been City of Scottsdale, and cheaper, which I know doesn't help your situation. Community ed aftercare is much more costly, and I've heard can be hard to reserve a spot. So that is a concern of mine. So that would not be possible for City of Scottsdale to have a contract with Tavon because they're in City of Phoenix?
This was under her purview, it still is.
Yes, but, so it is City of Phoenix, so the City of Scottsdale will not run their aftercare program, but we are trying to explore options. So like at ECHO, we had our Kids Club program there for preschool and pre-K because they don't service, the City of Scottsdale doesn't service the little ones because they're not a licensed program, so they had both. So we're trying to figure out at the schools that that parents had the benefit of an after-school program that perhaps one does not exist, what might we be able to implement? So we are keeping that on the forefront because Kids Club is before and after, depending on the start time. So for our 7:45 start time schools, we don't have before care, but if it's an 8:40 start time, then we would hopefully try to do. Some of our schools, they don't use City of Scottsdale for before care because they don't have a before care program, but they put together their own program. They use various funds to pay teachers to do, like, when I was a principal, we did a homework club for an hour and a half before school to kind of start, to bridge that gap that parents need at childcare, but we'll get more information.
Okay, you've been talking for an hour. So I want to thank Dr. Menzel, Leah, Dr. Bernal, everyone who's here, and thank you to all of you for coming. I know this is a very difficult topic. I said when I spoke, I can't imagine what it'd be like to be a parent at one of these schools, or honestly, to be on the decision-making side of it either. I don't envy anyone in this situation. But again, thank you all for coming. This is our last meeting of the semester and the calendar year. So happy holidays, and hope to see you all in January.
Have a safe and happy holidays.